At dawn the land looked abandoned by intention, a forgotten strip behind a shuttered breeding farm where the fence sagged and the earth never quite healed. Frost clung to weeds like thin glass, and the air carried the sour sweetness of old hay and rust. Nothing moved except the wind, threading through torn wire with a sound like breathing. It was the kind of place people passed without seeing, a margin where mistakes were quietly set down and left to weather themselves. In the shallow ditch near the tree line, something small stood unsteadily, as if undecided about remaining upright. She was a foal no older than a few weeks, her legs too long for her body and her coat dulled by cold. One ear bent at an awkward angle. Her ribs showed when she breathed, slow and careful, conserving what little strength remained. She did not call out. Instinct had taught her that noise did not bring help here. 100 yards away, a road cut across the field, pale with dust, leading toward town. Along it came a pickup truck moving slower than the posted limit, its engine ticking unevenly. Inside sat a person who once believed life would stay close to horses forever, though belief had thinned over the years like worn leather. Bills lay unpaid on a kitchen table at home. Work had become temporary, then scarce. The days were spent showing up anyway because habit is sometimes all that survives hope. The driver did not see the foal at first. Eyes stayed on the road, on the cracked horizon, on the arithmetic of fuel and time. The farm had closed months earlier, its reputation quietly folded away. Horses came and went from that place, expensive ones, fragile ones, bred for perfection and discarded for inconvenience. The driver knew this, had known it for years, and had learned to look past the evidence as a kind of self-defense. A movement by the ditch caught peripheral vision, no more than a flicker against the frost. The driver slowed, then told himself it was nothing, just trash shifting in the wind. But the image lingered, unresolved. Guilt has a way of arriving without explanation. The truck rolled forward another few yards, then stopped. Gravel popped softly under the tires. The engine idled, uncertain. When the door opened, cold rushed in. Boots touched ground that felt harder than it should have been. The driver stood still for a moment, listening, aware of how quiet the place was. Then came the sound, faint but unmistakable, a breath drawn too shallowly. In the ditch, the foal lifted her head. Her eyes were dark and wet, fixed not with fear but with something closer to expectation. Up close, she was smaller than imagined, lighter too, as if the world had already taken something from her. Mud caked her knees. A shallow cut traced her flank, poorly healed. She trembled when the wind passed, though she did not step back. The driver crouched, unsure where to put their hands, aware of the line they were crossing. To intervene was to accept responsibility. To walk away was to agree with the silence. Memories surfaced uninvited. A younger self brushing a patient mare, the weight of a lead rope in practiced hands, the belief that care could fix most things. That belief had been eroded, not by cruelty but by economics and exhaustion. Standing there now, the driver felt that erosion pause. The foal's breath fogged the air between them, a fragile proof of life that refused to be theoretical. No one else was coming. The farm buildings loomed empty, their windows blind. Somewhere in the distance, traffic hissed along the highway, indifferent. The driver reached out at last, fingers brushing coarse winter hair. The foal flinched, then steadied. That small acceptance carried weight. It asked a question without sound, and the answer could not be delayed much longer. The driver straightened, scanning the ground for signs, for explanations, for someone to blame. There were none. Only the foal, the cold, and a choice forming slowly like dawn. Helping would cost money and sleep and certainty. It would reopen a life the driver had begun to close. Yet leaving would cost something harder to name, something already thin but not gone. The foal shifted her weight, testing the earth, and for a moment nearly fell. Instinctively, the driver stepped closer. That movement, unplanned and irreversible, changed the geometry of the morning. Distance collapsed. The ditch no longer felt like a boundary but a threshold. Whatever had been discarded here was no longer alone, and the quiet agreement of neglect had been broken. The driver took a breath and let it out slowly. There was still time to walk back to the truck, to keep life manageable and small. But the foal watched, steady now, as if she had been waiting for this particular pause. In that shared stillness, the day tilted. The world did not yet know it, but something that was meant to disappear had just been seen. The driver reached for the frayed rope kept behind the seat, unsure why it was there or when it had last been used. Hands shook slightly, not from cold but from the weight of what came next. The foal lowered her head, trusting without understanding. Beyond the fence, the empty farm stood silent, its secrets intact for now. Papers would argue later. Voices would deny. But here in the pale morning, a line had been crossed that could not be uncrossed, and somewhere down the road, consequences were already gathering, patient as hooves waiting for the ring. No one called it rescue yet. No one knew her name. The engine still idled behind them, and the choice once made began to move forward on its own. The road ahead looked ordinary, but it was already carrying a story that would refuse to stay buried, even when powerful hands tried to cover it again later on. The driver did not speak as the rope slid from the truck, its fibers stiff with age and dust. Silence felt safer, as if words might startle the fragile agreement forming between human and animal. The foal watched every movement, ears twitching, her body angled to flee yet rooted by exhaustion. When the rope brushed her neck, she startled, then settled, breath hitching before evening out. That small surrender carried the weight of a promise neither fully understood. Loading her was slow and awkward. The foal balked at the lip of the truck bed, legs trembling, unsure of this narrow passage. The driver did not rush. Hands steadied her chest, feeling the rapid heartbeat beneath skin and bone. After a long pause, she climbed, hooves scraping metal, and stood uncertainly among old buckets and a folded blanket. The truck smelled of oil and hay, of a life once fuller. When the door closed, the sound landed heavier than expected, sealing more than a tailgate. The drive back followed back roads, winter fields sliding past in muted browns and grays. The foal swayed with each turn, adjusting, learning. The driver glanced back often, checking, counting breaths, listening for distress. None came. Instead there was a quiet resilience, a willingness to endure that felt older than her age. With each mile, the driver felt the choice settle, no longer abstract but physical, taking up space. The barn was modest, patched together from years of use and repair. Its boards bore the marks of weather and work, but it was dry and out of the wind. Inside, dust motes drifted in pale light. The driver laid fresh straw, guided the foal down, and watched her explore with cautious steps. She sniffed the ground, then lowered herself carefully, folding legs beneath her like she had done this before. Relief came unannounced, loosening something tight in the driver's chest. Water came first, then feed softened and offered by hand. The foal ate slowly, pausing often as if expecting interruption. The driver sat nearby on an upturned crate, close enough to intervene, far enough to respect space. Time stretched. Outside, afternoon slid toward evening. Inside, a rhythm emerged, fragile but real. The driver realized they were smiling, a small, surprised expression that faded just as quickly, and used to staying. A call to the local veterinarian went unanswered. Another to animal services ended with a recording about limited hours. The driver did not push. Tonight, survival felt like enough. They cleaned the foal's cut with warm water, fingers gentle, movements practiced despite the years. The foal flinched, then leaned into the touch, eyes half closing. Trust, once offered, seemed to multiply. Naming her happened without ceremony. The word came softly, almost accidentally, spoken into the quiet as if testing its fit. The foal lifted her head at the sound, ears forward, acknowledging it. The driver repeated it once more, feeling how naming turned obligation into relationship. To name was to admit she would stay at least for now. Night settled early. The barn cooled, breath visible in the dim. The driver pulled an old coat tighter, choosing to stay nearby. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by the foal's shifting, by worry, by the low ache of responsibility. Yet beneath it all was a steadiness, a sense of alignment long absent. Morning arrived pale and tentative, revealing the foal standing, stronger already, testing her legs with new confidence. Days followed a simple pattern. Feed, water, cleaning, quiet observation. The driver postponed calls, postponed decisions. Bills waited. Work would wait or not. The foal gained weight, her coat beginning to shine beneath the dirt. She learned the feel of a brush, the meaning of pressure and release. Sometimes she spooked at shadows. Sometimes she followed the driver willingly, curiosity winning over fear. Each small progress felt earned, not miraculous. Neighbors noticed, offering opinions more than help. Questions surfaced about origin, about legality, about cost. The driver listened without defending, absorbing the concerns like weather. At night, doubts crept in, practical and persistent. What if this ended badly? What if care was not enough? The foal answered none of it, simply existing, breathing, demanding presence. One afternoon, as light slanted through the barn, the driver watched her move across the small paddock. There was an ease in her gait, a balance that contradicted her rough beginning. She turned, stopped, and looked back, waiting. The driver felt a familiar pull, something like recognition. This was more than rescue, more than obligation. It hinted at a future that would invite scrutiny, questions, and resistance. As the sun dipped, casting long shadows, the driver stood at the fence, hands resting on worn wood. The foal came closer, pressing her nose against the driver's sleeve, leaving a smudge of warmth. Somewhere beyond the barn, systems existed that would not welcome this story. Papers would be missing. Records would deny her. Yet here she was, solid and undeniable. The driver understood then that saving her would not end with care, and that by stopping once, they had stepped into a path that would ask more than they had planned to give. Its strength grew quietly, enough to invite questions the driver could no longer avoid. One morning a veterinarian arrived, boots leaving dark prints on the barn floor, eyes trained and careful. She scanned the foal, checked joints, teeth, scars, then paused at the shoulder, measuring angles with her hands, saying little but thinking much. The air smelled of antiseptic and dust, and the driver watched every movement, bracing for verdicts that could close doors as easily as they opened them. No judgment came yet, only a nod that lingered between caution and possibility longer than expected in that moment alone. The vet asked about origins, about paperwork, about where the foal had come from. The driver answered honestly, which was to say imperfectly. Found near the old farm, no records, no witnesses. The vet frowned, not unkindly, and suggested a scan. The chip reader beeped once, then displayed a number that meant nothing yet carried weight. It was registered somewhere once before being erased. The driver felt a slow chill, different from fear, settle behind the ribs. Erasure implied intention, and intention implied someone watching from a distance who preferred not to be seen yet undeniably present in memory alone. Calls followed, careful ones, to registries and offices that answered with polite vagueness. Names were missing, files misplaced, dates inconclusive. The farm's closure complicated everything, a convenient fog. The driver listened, took notes, learned how absence could be documented as efficiently as presence, how a life could be unaccounted for without technically being lost. Each conversation ended gently, like a door closed with care. The foal watched from the paddock, unaware of the invisible net tightening. The driver felt anger flicker, then discipline it into patience. Rage would scatter facts before they could settle. Facts were the only protection now. Training began cautiously, not for competition but for clarity. The foal learned to lead, to halt, to accept touch where fear once lived. Her body responded quickly, muscle shaping itself with improbable grace. The driver noticed the way strangers paused when she moved, how balance drew the eye before beauty followed. It unsettled opinions offered freely, predictions about limits and ceilings. Some said she would never be enough, others said nothing at all. The driver absorbed it, focusing on routine as resistance. Every day she stood stronger, undeniable. Strength invited scrutiny. Scrutiny invited consequence. Consequences were coming slowly, inevitably forward. An envelope arrived without a return address, slid beneath the driver's door. Inside were copies of registration forms, partially redacted, a lineage impressive even through censorship. The foal had been bred for elite rings, her flaw minor, her disposal deliberate. The paper smelled faintly of toner and warning. No signature accompanied it, only implication. Someone knew and someone did not want conversation. The driver sat at the table, hands flat, breathing carefully. This was no longer neglect, it was design. Design carried money, pride, and lawyers. Compassion had crossed into dispute. Dispute required resolve. Resolve was expensive, still necessary. Now, pressure arrived indirectly. Feed suppliers hesitated. Advice turned sharp. Friends suggested selling quietly or letting authorities decide. Nights grew longer, filled with calculations and doubt. The foal slept standing, close, a constant presence that made retreat impossible. The driver dreamed of fences and forms, of doors that would not open. Morning brought resolve shaped by exhaustion rather than confidence. Care continued, quieter, more deliberate, as if observed. The foal responded with trust, deepening the stakes. Trust asked for defense. Defense demanded visibility. Visibility was dangerous. Danger felt unavoidable. Still the driver stayed. Staying had become the point. Nothing else mattered. A local show flyer appeared on the bulletin board, curling at the edges. Modest prizes, open entries. The driver ignored it at first, then looked again. Visibility could be weapon or shield. To enter was to risk exposure. To hide was to concede the story. The foal moved nearby, tracing circles, sound and calm. The driver imagined the ring, the eyes, the questions. Imagined refusal, imagined recognition. Neither outcome felt safe. Safety was no longer the goal. Truth pressed forward. The flyer stayed pinned. Decision ripened silently. Silence carried weight. Weight bent the future. Action waited. Waiting ended soon. Enough. The vet returned for a final check, aware now of more than health. She watched the foal move, nodded once and spoke plainly. The shoulder would not hinder her. She could compete. She paused, then warned about ownership disputes and reputations that defended themselves. The driver listened without interrupting, accepting risk as currency. When the vet left, the barn felt larger, emptier. The foal approached, placing her head against the driver's chest. Breath matched breath, grounding resolve. This was no longer accidental. It was a declaration. Declarations provoke response. Response would arrive. Sooner than desired. But readiness grew. Despite fear. Paperwork was assembled carefully, copies made, timelines noted. The driver learned the language of compliance, how to state facts without invitation. Each document felt like armor, thin but necessary. The foal grazed outside, unconcerned with human systems, trusting the day. Trust sharpened responsibility rather than easing it. The show date circled on a calendar, small and defiant. Friends warned again, voices tight with concern. The driver thanked them, then kept going. Going felt like integrity. Integrity feels safe. It felt necessary. Necessary things invite challenge. Challenge clarifies purpose. Purpose steadied hands. Hands prepared tack. Preparation became ritual. Ritual calmed fear. On the eve of entry, a message arrived from an unknown number. It referenced the foal obliquely, suggested withdrawal, implied protection in exchange for silence. The driver deleted it without reply, pulse steadying. Outside, the foal stood under fading light, muscles defined, eyes bright. Whatever had been discarded was now visible, and visibility had summoned attention. Tomorrow the ring would decide nothing officially, yet everything felt poised to change. Change invited confrontation, truth and consequences long deferred. The driver rested a hand on the gate, breathing. Behind them, forces gathered unseen. Seen or not, they were coming. Nothing could stop it. Morning at the showgrounds arrived pale and deliberate, sunlight stretching across packed dirt as trailers lined the fence. Horses stamped and snorted, steam rising from flanks polished to a practiced shine. The driver parked at the far edge, choosing distance over disguise, unloading with the same care used every day. The foal stepped down calmly, ears forward, unconcerned with the murmurs already forming. She wore simple tack, clean but unadorned, nothing to announce lineage or apology. The driver felt every eye without meeting them, grounding breath in routine. This was not defiance. It was presence. Inside the warm-up ring, movement spoke first. The foal stretched into her stride, balanced and willing, muscles responding like memory awakened. Riders slowed to watch. Conversations thinned. The driver felt a quiet steadiness replace fear, as if truth, once allowed motion, preferred clarity over conflict. When their number was called, the gate opened without ceremony. Hooves crossed the threshold. Dust lifted. The ring, empty seconds before, became a stage unwillingly hosting something it could not ignore. Judges watched with practiced neutrality, pens poised. The foal circled, halted, turned, responding to subtle cues. She did not perform, she existed, and existence proved enough. The driver's hands were steady now, guided by trust rather than calculation. Around them, silence spread, then a ripple of whispers. Recognition does not arrive loudly. It settles, undeniable. The bell rang. Applause followed, hesitant at first, then sincere. The foal stood, breathing evenly, unaware she had just rewritten a narrative designed to exclude her. Placings were announced. She did not win. It did not matter. A judge approached, asking questions that carried weight without accusation. Where did she come from? The driver answered plainly. The judge nodded slowly, eyes narrowing not in suspicion but in recognition. Across the ring, a man in tailored boots watched, expression measured, phone already in hand. Systems respond when challenged. The driver felt the temperature shift, not colder, sharper. This was the reckoning arriving quietly as promised. The man approached later, voice controlled, words precise. He spoke of mistakes, of misunderstandings, of reputations at risk. He suggested resolution through absence. The driver listened, hands resting on the lead rope, feeling the foal's steady pull toward hay and rest. When the man finished, the driver responded once, evenly, offering documents, dates, proof assembled patiently. No accusation, no demand. Just facts laid down like tracks. The man's smile tightened, then vanished. He left without agreement, without threat. Power does not always announce retreat, but it recognizes limits. Officials convened briefly. Papers changed hands. Questions were asked again, this time formally. The driver answered, voice steady, while the foal waited nearby, head low, trusting the pause. The outcome was not dramatic. It was procedural, fair, irreversible. Ownership stood. Records would be amended. Silence could no longer pass as truth. The driver felt relief arrive not as celebration, but as release, a weight set down carefully to avoid noise. Justice, when it comes, often does so like this. The day continued around them, shows finishing, crowds thinning. A few people stopped to offer quiet congratulations, others avoided eye contact. The driver loaded the foal as evening cooled the air, movements unhurried. As they drove away, the grounds receded, ordinary again, but something essential had shifted. The road felt different, not easier but aligned. Consequences would follow, some costly, some affirming. None felt unbearable now. The driver had chosen visibility, and visibility had answered with truth. In the weeks that followed, support arrived unexpectedly. A small grant. A donated stall. People who had watched and remembered. The driver did not grow rich or famous. They grew steadier. The foal grew stronger, her days filled with work and rest, her future no longer negotiable. Together they built something modest and resilient, a place for those deemed expendable. The driver learned that perseverance attracts allies quietly over time, when it refuses to bend. One evening, as light softened the paddock, the foal moved across the grass, confident and whole. The driver leaned on the fence, watching, feeling the arc of what had been risked and returned. Abandonment had met attention. Erasure had met record. A life meant to vanish had stood in public and been counted. The lesson was not triumph, but recognition. Worth does not ask permission. It waits to be seen.